said with so much passion. We appreciate that. All right, next up we have Bob is going to share his journey as a genetic patient.
All right, that's going to be hard to follow. Anyways, my name is Bob Sanders. I'm president of the HypoPARAthyroidism Association. I have a TBX1 genetic form of hypoparathyroidism. I'm the middle of 5 boys, all of whom have been diagnosed with hypopara at various stages of development. We all differ in symptoms and severities. I was the last one to be diagnosed in our family with hypoparathyroidism at the age of 18. I grew up with hypopara. We were never alone because we always had each other. It's kind of insulated in that aspect. We knew each other's symptoms and signs of low calcium. We had to, so we could stay ahead of potential crashes. We had to look out for each other. But I cannot stress again how different each one of us was. My father, James Sanders, was diagnosed with hypopara at the age of 20, or around there. He grew up with doctors telling his parents that his symptoms were not real. They were in his head. He was crazy. His constant fatigue and tetany prevented him from playing outside with his siblings and friends. And he spent his childhood in the house reading books and watching TV. In the early 90s, my father enrolled our entire family into 1 through 34 PTH trial at the NIH with Dr. Karen Weiner. We stayed at the Children's Inn and got to know many other children and families, not only with hypopara, but other rare diseases from around the world. During our time at the Children's Inn, my father was inspired by God to create this community connecting people diagnosed with hypopara in 1994. And in 1995, the organization was officially recognized by the IRS as a nonprofit organization. Me, I'm one of the lucky ones. My calcium is easily managed. My worst symptoms include brain fog and tingling and a little bit of fatigue. Unfortunately, I have no way to judge how well I am. I could be bad, I have no idea, but because I'm genetic. I don't have a normal. I don't have a baseline for a normal, but this is my normal. But because I grew up with hypopara, I didn't understand the vision of my father. It's not because I didn't care, it's because I was complacent. I just didn't know. I married the love of my wife a week before my 21st birthday. Together we have 3 children, 2 girls, 1 boy. All 3 carry the genetic mark for TBX1. I was confident that even if my kids were eventually diagnosed with hypopara, I could handle it. I have the experience and knowledge of how to treat the disease, stemming from a lifetime of advocacy. But all that changed with our youngest daughter, Jocelyn. When she was 12 years old, she had her first major calcium crash. I noticed the tetany setting in, and I knew we had to act fast. If she could hold fluids down, then she could take calcium, and we would have a fighting chance. Unfortunately, after an hour, we ended up in the ER in Williston, North Dakota, a very small town in northwest North Dakota. Immediately, I told the doctors about her family history and asked them to check her calcium levels. As suspected, her serum calcium levels came back extremely low. Her symptoms continued to worsen, and she was now experiencing severe tetany, fatigue, and brain fog. She didn't know where she was or what was happening. I told the doctors that if they started her on IV calcium, the symptoms would subside. They did not listen to me, no matter how much knowledge and experience I had. They disregarded the low calcium and instead focused on treating the multitude of symptoms that were related to low calcium. In my desperation, I reached out to my dad for help. The ER doctors refused to speak to him because he was not a doctor. So my father contacted Dr. Karen Weiner at the NIH and asked if she would help. And she agreed, and so we provided the ER doctors with her personal phone number. She was waiting on the other phone at 10:30 at night. They would not talk to her because they did not know who she was. I said, Google her. It's easy enough. But they still would not listen. By now, the doctors had started giving Jocelyn morphine just to relieve her of her pain. I continued to argue and plead with the doctors to start IV calcium. They continued to disregard me. Again, I pleaded with them to call Dr. Weiner, but they refused. After 4 hours in the ER, the doctors ultimately gave up and admitted her around midnight. They told me the resident doctor would be there in the morning to develop a treatment plan. I was desperate. I knew she could not wait another 6 to 8 hours without treatment, but nobody would listen. Unfortunately, this experience has echoed throughout the community of hypopara. I will never forget how my daughter looked as they checked into the room that night. She was in full tetany now. Her hands and her feet were turned in, her body contorted while she lay in a fetal position. Even the morphine could not subdue her pain. With tears streaming down her eyes, her face, she asked, "Am I dying?" I was so angry and desperate for anyone to listen to me. Thankfully, the nurses saw this, and they recognized the dire situation that we were in. And they said, "What do we need to do to help?" I said, "She needs IV calcium. We need to get those levels up." And they said, "Unfortunately, without a doctor there, we cannot put the order in." And all we could do was pray for a miracle. And our prayers were answered that night. Jocelyn, without any reason whatsoever, she was able to start holding down fluids. She was able to start eating. And so with this, we were giving her anything that we could find with calcium that was in the hospital. Yogurt, Tums, milk, it didn't matter. If it had calcium in it, it was going in, and she was holding it down. This was just enough to hold us over until we seen the doctor in the morning. And after 10 hours of this, she finally got the calcium that she needed. So 2 months later, I attended my first hypopara conference in Chicago. During that conference, my father retired and stepped down as association president. I was overtaken by emotion as I watched member after member express their gratitude to him for this community that he created and started. To this day, I still have people coming up to me telling me, "Tell your dad thank you for what he has done." I finally understood what my dad was doing, and I decided to get involved. So over the years, Jocelyn has had multiple related calcium crashes, resulting in seizures. She takes anywhere between 4,000 and 5,000 milligrams of calcium each day just to feel normal. She continues to fight, never gives up. She's a competitive dancer. It's not easy, but we make it work. But I cannot help but wonder what this standard of care is doing to her body. Will she have significant calcification of soft tissues, cataracts, kidney failures? She's only 17 with a lifetime ahead of her. And I can only pray that she can maintain a high quality of life. The HPA is instrumental in approval of the first replacement PTH therapy in TransCon. I have personally witnessed how PTH therapy can positively affect the quality of life and how the removal of that same therapy significantly burdens and destroys quality of life. I have seen how standard of care is inefficient and leads to long-term complications, from kidney failure to calcifications of soft tissues, brain fog, kidney stones, fatigue, tetany, the list goes on and on. I could testify that each person diagnosed with hypopara is different. Indeed, we are like snowflakes, each unique in symptoms and severities. For years, hypoparathyroidism has been associated with low serum calcium levels, and the standard of care is just to treat low calcium with more calcium. This treatment is false. Low calcium is only a symptom of hypopara. It is the low to no parathyroid hormone in the blood. That is what needs to be treated. Hypothyroid is an endocrine disorder first and foremost and must be treated as such. And I compare it to telling a person with diabetes to manage their blood sugar by just watching what they eat and nothing else. I'm passionate because I'm not only a patient, but I'm a father and I'm also a caregiver. Thank you.